Okay, welcome everybody. Let's see if I can get my own screen under control here. So welcome to our eBird presentation. A lot of folks have been on MRBO webinars and meetings in the past. So I just want to note that this is in meeting format. So you can be seen and or heard by us and others if you so choose. So just a couple of things about your Zoom controls. You should have, depending on the device, probably at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a bar that looks like this. So we are going to ask everybody to be on mute unless you are speaking up to ask Mary a question. Video is right here. If you can see my cursor, you can be, on video if you like. And the chat function can also be important. You are welcome to ask questions. Mary said during her presentation is fine. You can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just speak the question. I did want to point out also, typically, again, depending on the device you're using, you might see a little button called View. For me, it's up in the top right-hand corner of my screen, and if you hit that, you can see different views. So you can basically make the speaker bigger, which I typically leave it on gallery, and you can see more people. And then when Mary and I have slides up, you'll still be able to see some people, but not as many, or you can just see the speakers. So that's how to go ahead and do that. Just a quick introduction. My name is Dana. I'm the co-founder of the Missouri River Bird Observatory. A lot of folks on here I know, and we've worked with you in the past. But for folks that are not quite as familiar, our mission is the conservation of birds and their habitats via science, education, and advocacy. And as far as the education and sort of public outreach end of things goes, we in a typical year have about 100 different events. Lots of them are for students, a lot are for adults as well. Most are outdoors, as you can imagine, as we're encouraging people to get out and learn their birds and really just kind of raise appreciation for birds and other wildlife and their conservation. So obviously the last year or so has been atypical, and we've gone to this more virtual format as far as education and outreach is concerned. And I've been really thankful because at least it does allow us some connection with folks that we don't get to see right now. And hopefully we'll see you in person soon. So we are continuing our webinars here into 2021. Just wanted to note, if you go to mrbo.org/events, you'll see all these webinars. And I wanted to note that if you go here with these little arrows and you hit this back arrow, it'll take you to previous events. And we have all kinds of recordings of different webinars with cool guest speakers on all kinds of different bird and nature related topics. So with that, I am very, very happy to introduce Mary Nemecek. She is a prolific, experienced birder. She is one of 3 state eBird reviewers, which is why we asked her to do this presentation. There's kind of a lot of ins and outs of eBird, and it's an incredibly important community science tool for tracking bird populations. Mary is also on the Missouri Bird Records Committee. She just finished a term as the president of Burroughs Audubon Society of Greater Kansas City, and she is still Burroughs conservation chair right now. Mary is also a excellent and tireless advocate for conservation of birds and their habitats and natural areas and green spaces. And she is also one of my best friends in Missouri and in the world. So I'm really happy to have her. And my friend, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. And so I'll talk a little bit while I figure out how to share my screen about what my presentation is and kind of what we're going to do. When I started this, I wasn't quite sure where to start, and knowing that we've got people from different levels, some people have a lot of experience using eBird and some people are probably pretty new to it. I'm kind of in the middle, so I'll start at the beginning and keep going and just ask me any questions that you have as they come along, and it's fine to interrupt me and ask while we're at that point. So here we go. So what is eBird? eBird was developed by Cornell University, and it is a tracking device to allow you to keep a list of birds and locations that you have seen. But it also has the added benefit of allowing other people to utilize that data in studying whether it's range expansion or a seasonal report or how many of a threatened or endangered species use a particular area. Um, it's really prior to eBird, we used to keep lists, or there was some software that we could use where we could list our birds, but that was really us. So unless somebody knew us, they had no idea what was on our list. And this allowed that conglomeration of data to come together and be able to be used to contribute to citizen science. And it also helps us find birds that we want to go look at and places we want to be and things like that. So it's continuing to evolve. It gets cooler and cooler every time they do an update. And there's some good things I think that'll be coming in the next one too. And it just gets better and better. Um, so if you guys can see this, oh my God, I hear about those eBird reviewers all the time. I want to talk a little bit about what we do. So your eBird list is always yours. You can put anything you want on there and that will always be your bird on that list. eBird reviewers have nothing to do with the birds that you record for your list. What we do manage is the data. So we manage what goes into the public output and what the filters do. So filters help notify you, hey, this bird's not expected here at this time or this location. And then what data is released to the public when they go to pull it to look at something. So if you want to find a place that has say great horned owls, you can go into eBird, pull great horned owls for the state, find a location where they've been seen recently near you, and then plan your trip accordingly. So that data that you can go in and see for others, that's what we manage. We have nothing to do with what is on your personal list. That's always your data, and that will never change based on anything an eBird reviewer does. So I thought the easiest thing to do would be to start with the app that we use, because most people, I think, use eBird in the field. And so the first thing is you get your phone out. I do it when I pull up to whatever location I'm going to bird, open up my app, and that is your start time. You can change it. You can hit the plus or minus button. Can you guys see my cursor? Dana, can you guys see the cursor?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you can hit the plus or minus button if you want to change your time. Like you pulled up, started birding. Oh, I've been birding for 20 minutes. Let me go back and change my time. But if you pull it up and open it, that's your start time. There is a little button on there that says record track, and this will record your path that you have taken. So if that is on and green, it will record where you walked, where you drove, and the total number of miles. So when you get to the end of your list, you don't have to go back and calculate that. It does it for you. I will say this, eBird routes should be 10 miles or less. The thought around that is if you're birding more than 10 miles, you're probably into different habitat or different hotspots, and you need to start a new list. If you're driving back and forth a bunch of times, you could rack up more than 10 miles. And so, maybe you're birding the same area and you just went back and forth a lot, and so 10 miles isn't really appropriate. But if you're driving from Kansas City to St. Louis and you want to record every bird that you have seen on the way, eBird is probably not the best way to do that because it likes those routes to be 10 miles or less. So then you hit start checklist. And the first thing I would do is choose a location. When you pull up the locations, the hotspots are in orange and the personal locations are in blue. And this is one thing that I do fault eBird with. If you were at Smithville Lake and you were at the dam, the first option you have is this blue spot that says south end of the dam. If you select that, it becomes your personal location and it doesn't blend your data with the hotspot. If you go up and look at like Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge, there are all these blue personal locations because it's the first thing that comes up. People don't know. And they select that, and then you have to go in and merge your data with the hotspot for it to be there. And one day I made a goal that I was going to clean up all of these personal locations and these hotspots, and then I gave up because it was just a little bit overwhelming. But think of it, hotspots are orange, fire, hot. Personal locations are blue. So personal locations for yards or little places that you bird that aren't really open to the public. But if it's a public location, choose a hotspot that's orange. So you would pick whatever you want in Smithville Lake Dam or Smithville Lake Clay County, and then click use this location. And then you can start entering your species. Now notice up here at the top, it says auto selected. It just has the longitude and latitude. I didn't pick a location for this one. So if you're somewhere like Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge and you see a common gallinule there in summer, it probably won't flag it in eBird if you have Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge picked as your location. If you don't, it probably will flag it. So if you pick the right location, you get a lot better data as to what is expected there and what isn't. Otherwise, you may be entering a lot of notes for species you don't need to. So I would always check this and make sure you've got your location in there. And then you can start entering it. So one thing that I've noticed a lot of times when people are new to eBird is if they see gadwalls, they'll want to click on gadwall and go in and adjust the number. So if they have 100 gadwall and they see 25 more, they'll click on gadwall, they'll go in and they'll override that 100 and put in 125. You don't have to do that. You can type in 25 GA, it pulls up gadwall. If I click on gadwall, it will automatically add 25 to my total. So if I'd already seen 100, now I've seen 125. So that's super easy to keep count while you're going. So as I talked about, entering the location helps you with your high counts. This, I can't, over here, will tell you to check your entry and be sure that this is what you wanted. So when you see an exclamation point like that, it says the 26 American white pelicans have exceeded the filter at that location. So you're seeing more birds there than what is expected. And maybe it's a typo, maybe it's accurate, but that tells you, hey, there's something going on here. Just double check this. It will also make you enter a note. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But the other thing I wanted to point out is these little circles, they mean something. So if you don't have a circle at all, so there's no circle down here with great blue heron, that's an expected species. More than 6% of the checklist there in the last 3 months have reported that species. If you have a circle with orange in it, that means that it has been reported there in the last 3 weeks, but on fewer than 6% of the checklist. So it's seen there, but it's not super common. Okay, so there's also red dots, and I'll talk about those in just a second. I've got an example of it. But so you have no dot, half orange, and then red. Okay, so on my pelicans here, when you click on this exclamation point, it'll tell you what to do. So it says, please add comments for this observation. So one of the things as eBird reviewers is the quality of the notes that you put in are super helpful when we go to look at the data. So saying conservative count, which it may be, I mean, you may look out there and think, oh my gosh, there's 10,000 ring-billed gulls out there, I'm going to report 5. Great, but I have no idea when I look at that. Do you know what 10,000 ring-billed gulls look like? How did you determine that? What we kind of want to see is counted by ones or counted by tens. 3 groups of 20 to 30 flew over, something that just kind of gives us some context into how you came up with that number. Counted by thousands, half the lake was full, that kind of thing. The more you can give us on the information about how you got to the count, then the easier it is for us to say, yes, this makes a lot of sense. So an example would be trumpeter swans up at Los Bluffs. There's over 2,000 up there right now in the refuge count. And so we'll get a lot of checklists in that'll have over 1,000 or over 2,000, and they're currently flagged. And some people put, I don't know why this is flagged, it was on the refuge report. Well, the eBird doesn't know what was on the refuge report. But if you say, counted by tens as we went around the loop, or counted by hundreds, or basing this on the refuge report, it just helps us know how exactly you got to that number. So the more information you can give us, the better. And then, let's see here. Dana, can you see there's people in the waiting room?
Thank you, Mary. Oh,
You're
yep.
welcome. So this is what the filters look like. And I wanted to put this up here because a lot of times we'll get notes in the comments in the notes that says shouldn't have been flagged, record not exceptional, or something like that. This is from Texas, but as great as eBird is, and the filters have come a long way, because back in the early days, you could only set them by month. So there's a lot of species that are here at the end of the month that aren't here at the beginning of the month, and vice versa. But I wanted you to see, so you pick a filter area. So it may be a hot spot like Los Bluffs National Wildlife Refuge. It may be something like a county. And then you have to set the dates. And so not every bird knows that they're supposed to show up on the 5th of March. And so they may show up on the 4th of March, or they may show up on the 3rd of March, or they may show up in greater numbers that year than what we expect early on. So just because it trips the filter doesn't mean, oh my gosh, something is awry, but it does mean that this is a little bit unusual. And if it's something that comes in a few days early, or something that comes in a little bit higher numbers, you'll never hear from the eBird reviewer. They'll approve that and move on. If it's something that comes in that isn't supposed to be here, that's when we get involved. So I thought this would be helpful because so many people don't understand how the filters are, and it's that we have to pick a date and we have to pick a number. And so you may be just one over it or one day before it, it'll still trip the filter because there's no logic in it other than this date and this number.
Hey, Mary, I'm going to jump in with a couple questions for you
Sure.
here. One actually related to the hotspot colors. So Jean says on an Android app, I have blue flames and blue without flames to designate locations. Is this just a different coloring scheme for Android than iPhone? Or does blue indicate something else when it comes to hotspots? And Randy commented that his Android is the same, but it just changed in the last week or so. So that's one question.
It just changed to the blue flames in the last week.
He's nodding.
Interesting. I do not know the answer to that. As far as I know, there was not an update. Hang on, I'm going to pull my app up on my phone real quick. That came out that would have done that. But let me look. No, mine's still blue and orange. So I will get an answer for that. And Dana, if you can email them back
For sure.
afterwards. Okay. So
Yep,
blue
absolutely.
flames and non-blue, and blue with no flames, correct?
Yep. In Android, correct.
Okay.
Our next question is, and I wondered this too, why is 6% the threshold for birds to be considered uncommon?
So 6%, I don't know why eBird determined that number. But that's the basis. So if a bird's been reported once out of, I don't know, what would 6% be? 20 lists? Be about 5%. It's going to be orange and not white. So 6% of the list, that means that bird's expected to be there, meaning more people have reported this, your chances of finding the species is good. If it's orange, it just means, yes, 1 or 2 people have seen this, a low number of lists have seen this. You may find it, but it's not expected there, so to speak. So does that help? And I don't know why eBird picked 6%. That was the number they picked. This one has the red dot here for like long-eared owls, and that means the species has not been observed in those 3 weeks. So in that 3-week grid, no one has seen that species. So if you want to report a long-eared owl, just that's what that means. You're the first one that has seen that in recent time.
Very good. And the original questioner says, yes, that helps. Thank you.
Okay.
Another just came in as well regarding hotspots. What would prompt you to designate a point as a hotspot? What are the criteria? So, and I think that's a great question.
That's a great question. And we want people to designate things as hotspots if it fits. So I would not designate something on private property that people don't want the public trekking on as a hotspot. A hotspot is typically a public area that is frequently birded. So a park, a refuge, but it can also be something like when we had the brown booby in Missouri, we designated a brown booby stakeout hotspot. And what it does is it keeps you from ending up with 100 different personal locations spread along the bank of the river. So there's, I know on the Kansas side, is it the snowy owl? There's a couple hotspots that were recently designated over there due to species that showed up in fields. Um, so just because if a snowy owl was in a field and it was designated as a snowy owl stakeout hotspot, that doesn't mean that people automatically have permission to go to that field. It could be a private property situation, but it does mean that's where the bird is typically found. And so that just helps people when they go look for it, you know, this is where it is, and it keeps us from having to manage 50 different personal locations in that area. And it also keeps track because you can go to the snowy owl stakeout and see when the last time somebody was there that saw the bird, versus if it's a personal location, you got to go click on every single one of them to see the date that the bird was seen. So that helps other people know when was the last time that species was seen there as well.
Mary, another question came in that is related to this slide and the last one as well. If one is birding an area that is not birded often, does that mean more reports are likely to be flagged because of the list rules?
No, and I'm going to go into how we set up the filters in just a second. So I think that question will be answered. And if it's not, ping me again. Let me know.
Great, thanks.
Are we caught up? Okay.
We are.
All right. So this shows what happens when you enter a rare species. So there's been a long-tailed duck. There's actually been a male and a female up at Smithville Lake this recently. And so it's orange because it's been reported in the last 3 weeks, but it's not been reported on more than 6% of the checklist. But it also shows that it's rare. Now, just because something has a red or orange dot doesn't mean it's rare. Just because something's rare doesn't mean it will have a red or orange dot. So those two signifiers in eBird are completely separate. But anyway, so long-tailed duck, it tells you it's rare. And it will pop up a little message that will say notes have to be entered for this species. And you cannot enter those notes for that. You cannot close that checklist and submit it without entering some notes for that species. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those notes should look like here in just a second. So I want to talk a little bit about why things come up rare. It can be a bird that is here at certain times of the year, but it's not expected here at the time you're entering the checklist. Or it could be a bird that we just don't see in the state very often or ever. And that's the same thing. So I use dowitchers as an example of birds that are only here at certain times because this comes up a lot in the spring. And there are ways, this is a short-billed and a long-billed dowitcher, and we can have a whole program on dowitcher ID if you're interested in it. But timing is also crucial when it comes to reporting these birds. So it's the 15th of March and I have a short-billed dowitcher and eBird flagged it. And I'm super frustrated because I've got a dowitcher, it's 15th of March, why is eBird flagging this, for crying out loud? If you don't have this book, I would encourage you to go, and Dana can put the link in the chat, and download it. It's free. It's Mark Robbins' book, The Status and Distribution of Birds in Missouri. He just recently updated it. I think this one has been out just a little over a month. I keep it on my phone as a PDF. I have it on my computer. And then I also bought a hard copy because it helps me when I do things like seasonal reports to have that hard copy. But however you want it, on your phone, on your computer, it's completely free for download. And if you want a hard copy, there is a way to buy that. All of our eBird filters are aligned with the data, and all of the data that we have went into this book. And then likewise, we aligned all the eBird filters with it. Sometimes Mark will say things like the middle of the month, this bird is not seen in the state prior to the middle of March. Well, middle of March is a little bit ambiguous. And remember, with the eBird filters, we have to pick a date. So if we pick March 15th, middle of the month, it could have shown up on March 12th. That's not an exceptional record, but it'll still trip the figure filter just because we had to pick that date. So I've entered the short-billed dowitcher. I pull out Mark's book. I'm like, oh my gosh, why do they have this? The filters are wrong. And I look it up and I'm like, uh-oh, because it says that the short-billed dowitcher does not appear until the end of April, with a peak during mid-May. So 15th of March, short-billed dowitchers aren't supposed to be here. But what's even cooler about his book is I can go down here and look for the earliest date. This bird has never been seen in the state before the 20th of April. So if it's the 15th of March and I think I have a short-billed dowitcher, I have that bird almost a month before anybody else has ever seen that bird in the state. So, well, let me go look up long-billed dowitcher. Oh, long-billed dowitcher is typically not observed until the beginning of the second week of March. And here we are, March 15th, and this would make total sense. So I know when I see a dowitcher before the middle of April, it is probably a long-billed dowitcher. And if I think it's a short-billed dowitcher, I had better have some pretty good idea as to why I think that. And this also will have earliest dates and latest dates in here. So we know long-billed dowitchers leave the state by the end of May. And if you think you've got a long-billed dowitcher in May or June, then get good documentation, because that's an important sighting, because we've never seen that bird in the state at that time. Does this help? Because I know a lot of, I think timing wise, a lot of people wonder, like, how do I know if my bird is early or late, or why is it? And Mark's book is really super helpful with that. So, must be a long-billed dowitcher. Okay, so now I have to add my comments. If you can get a recording or a photo, and photos are super easy to get now with, cell phones and spotting scopes, and everybody always makes fun. If you go into eBird, all of my photos are at a slant, because that's how my phone sits on my spotting scope. It just leans like that. So people are like, Mary's birds are always swimming uphill or whatever, but all of my photos are slanted because that's how it's on there. But that's the best. If you can get a photo, or if you can get a recording of the vocalizations. If you can't, then anything you can say about how you came to that ID and how you ruled out similar species. So like in the case of a dowitcher, if it's one of them that's not supposed to be here at that time, how did you determine that was what it was and not the one that was supposed to be here at that time? When people see birds that have been reported repeatedly, a lot of time we'll get notes that say continuing, and that's probably the most hated phrase for eBird reviewers, because it tells us nothing, although that's really it. The long-tailed duck at Smithville Lake is a continuing bird. I don't know what else to say about it. It's been here. Some people reported it every couple of days. But you have to put in some kind of a note before you can submit the list. So if I have photos, I'll just put in photos, and then we're going to talk about how to upload those. If I don't have photos, I'll put in notes about how I came to that ID. And let's talk a little bit about how to put in photos. So go ahead and complete your list, and you're going to hit, you're going to add your notes. You're going to add your distance if you didn't track it. You're going to add your time. If you go home and you forgot to close your list out when you were birding, it's going to set that time when you get home as your time. So you'll have to go in and adjust it. If you submit your list when you're done birding, it'll use that time when you were actually out in the field. So you're going to hit submit, and then you're going to go to your home page on your app. And at the top, you've got not submitted and submitted checklists. If you click on submitted, this will show the checklist that you just uploaded most recently. I want to add a photo to the Smithville Lake checklist from January 8th. So I'm going to hit submitted, and I'm going to click on this checklist. That's going to bring up my checklist. I can edit it here, but if I want to add a photo, I need to go to the bottom of the page and click ebird.org. Now this is assuming the photo is on my phone. If the photo is on the computer, then, on your camera, and you have to do it at the computer, then you'll have to do it when you get home. But this is how you can do it in the field if it's on your phone. So I'm going to click on eBird.org down here at the bottom, and it's going to open up my list in the browser. And when I get the list open, it looks exactly like this. I'm going to click on this blue button. It's going to bring up this drop down. I'm going to hit Manage Media. And then I am going to add media to the species that I want. And I apologize, I know this isn't a Canada goose. It was just the photo I had handy when I was doing this. But you can do a recording off your phone. So if you use your smartphone to record vocalization in the field, You can hit add media and upload the vocalization here, or if you have a photo, you can hit add media. Now, the one mistake that I make more times than I care to admit is I'll hit add media, I'll pick my picture, it'll show up here, and I'll hit done. If it's not completed uploading, if this bar isn't finished, if it still says uploading one file, if you hit done, you've lost that picture. You got to go back in and add it. And I get fast, and I do this all the time, but you've got to double check, make sure you let the picture upload, make sure this uploading one file goes away, and then you can hit done, and it will save that photo into your list. One other thing that I like to use when I'm out in the field to see when the last time a species was seen is bird's eye. And I don't know, this used to be free, and I can't tell on my phone if it's still free, but I think it is. You can upload it and go into rare birds, and then based on the radius that you set, it will show you all of the rare birds that have been seen in that area recently. So here you see the long-tailed duck, and it will tell you when the last time it was reported at Smithville Lake is. If there's a check mark, this has been accepted. It's been reviewed and accepted. And if you click on it, you can also go in and look at the checklist. So if you're out in the field and somebody reports a vermilion flycatcher and the list has been uploaded, you could go in here, pull the list up even before it's been reviewed, click on it, and see if there's a photo in there to see what kind of a bird they're reporting, if you agree with the ID or that kind of thing. So super cool. So down here on this little ruddy duck, you see this, I can get my cursor to work, this January 13th record hasn't been reviewed yet. There's no check mark in front of it. So this feature should be, something like this should be added to eBird in the future. It's in the beta testing process right now. But until it gets there, I like this app a lot. And this is really the only part of it I use. It's also got species ID and photos and other things in there that other people may find useful, but I really like this rare bird section of it right here.
Mary, we have a comment related to that, and I actually have my own question about it.
Sure.
Kathy says bird's eye is free within a 50-mile radius. To get more than 50 miles away, you do need to pay, which is pretty interesting.
Yes, thanks, Kathy.
My question is, so this is somehow like synced with eBird?
It is.
Who is the proprietor or whatever of this app?
I think it's Cornell, but I cannot swear to that. But once you upload an eBird checklist, it will show up here within 20, 30 minutes max.
Interesting.
So it's pretty quick. Yes. And you can look at it too to see if you've seen something and you want to know if it's been reviewed, you can go in here and look at it. Now it doesn't go back forever. There's only like, 5 or 6 lists under each rare bird species, but you can go in there and see if it's been reviewed. You can, I mean, that's really all I use it for. There's a lot of other things. You can put in a species you're looking for, and it'll show you the hotspots that it's been seen at recently. But this piece, I think, with the rare birds is important, because if you have a long-tailed duck and no one's seen that bird for 5 days, I would like something more than continuing in the notes. So the Barrow's goldeneye hasn't been seen up at Smithville since January 12th. If somebody saw that bird tomorrow, it would be great if they took a picture of it or at least had a very good description of it. And so this kind of helps with that, because we have had instances where a lot of people have been looking for a rare bird for a week and no one has seen it. And then we get a checklist and it'll just say continuing. And what does that meet the threshold for public output or not? Versus if it was a photo, then no question. We've got good documentation. And 100 years from now, I can tell you from looking at historical records, I think it is so cool. You can go back 100 years from now and pull it up and say, nope, they had long-tailed ducks every winter at Smithville, and look, they've got photos for it, and this is how long it stayed. Versus, now when we go back 100 years, we just rely on notes that they put in there. So I'm super excited about this.
Teresa just noted, it looks like she looked it up. The app was launched by Cornell in 2002.
Okay.
Did we even have smartphones? No. I didn't until like 2015, but okay. So it is associated, that's why they're getting the eBird uploads so efficiently and quickly.
And I think that's why they look to have this data in eBird someday, so this won't be necessary. So you won't have to have two apps. But for right now, this is how I do it. So
Teresa says eBird was in 02, but this app is a Cornell app as well. So.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else?
Thanks. Nope.
All right. The other thing that I would encourage you to know how to get to if you don't or download it on your phone or your computer is the annotated checklist that is on the Missouri Birding Society website, mobirds.org. And you go under MBR, I'd have to look, I think it's MBRC, and it'll say annotated checklist. And then this will tell you roughly when species are expected. So black-bellied whistling duck, winter visitor, it's A, which means accidental. If something has an A or a CA, which means casual, it means that there's fewer than 15 records in the state. The bird will probably require documentation with the Missouri Bird Records Committee, and that is a really good observation. If it's got rare, it's not necessarily unexpected, but not seen very often. And then it'll also have it, by season or areas of the state. So for example, down here you have fulvous whistling duck. It's casual in the north, but it's accidental in the southeast. Or for transient and summer visitor, it's rare in the south, casual in the north, summer resident, accidental in the southeast. So this also helps you figure out what birds are supposed to be here at what time. And if anybody memorizes this, I'll buy them lunch. So
I just put the link to that annotated checklist in the chat.
Thank you. So that's really kind of it. If anybody has any questions, if there's any topics I didn't cover that you're interested in, let me know.
I think there was one question, I'm not sure, about how a hotspot gets established. Was that answered?
Well, okay, so I talked about what makes up a hotspot. How you establish it is, if it's an area that you are birding, you can suggest that for a hotspot. So there's a city park in your neighborhood, nobody's ever birded it before. Now you go there once or twice a week, you just suggest it as a hotspot, and Ryan handles those for the state, and he'll accept it. So when you put in your eBird list, you'll put it in as a personal location. I think you have to go on the computer to do it, but then you would go into location and hit suggest as hotspot, and that'll send it to Ryan to approve it. And then like we did with the brown booby, we'll usually send out a message if there's a bunch of personal locations and somewhere that's developed a hotspot, and let everybody know that they can merge with that. So you would just go in, open up your checklist, click on location, and hit merge with hotspot. And that will move all that data in under that one hotspot so people can see all the records. And if you oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
If anybody ever has any questions on how to do that, statewide, your reviewers are Josh Effman, Ryan, and myself. And then you have also regional reviewer Liza down in the Southeast, Pete in Columbia and Jeff City, and Diane in St. Louis. But any of us are glad to walk you through those processes if you have any questions on it.
Thanks, Mary. I had wondered that myself about the merging with hotspots and how that worked. We have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's good to go back and
we have, let's see. How can you enter something like a Harlan's or Kreider's red-tailed hawk? I have seen that done, but can't figure out how to do it.
are you doing this on the app?
Yes.
Okay. So hang on, let me pull my app up so I can take you through this step by step. Subspecies. A lot of subspecies are in the app. Sometimes I have had to go into the computer when I get home and do it. For some reason, not all the subspecies sometimes will show up. But when I go into my app, if I type in red tail, my choices are red tail hawk borealis, red tail hawk calurus, red tail hawk Harlan's, and red tail hawk Kreider's. Under that, it will say click here to search full taxonomy. And if you do that, it'll bring up all the other ones, your abaticulas, hawks, red-tailed hawks that don't exist in North America. So you can have a whole selection there of what you're looking for.
Thanks. Our next question is, has the increase in birders made your job as a reviewer more challenging?
It's made it busier. So I know all of us are on eBird every day, and I would say you can figure it's at least 30 minutes to an hour per reviewer in Missouri. So, at least 6 hours, probably more, are spent reviewing records every day. That's a lot of volunteer hours over the course of a year. But I also really enjoy it because I get to know who the new birders are and what people are interested in. And so no, I wouldn't say harder. I enjoy it. We've just needed more help. So we brought on some more people.
Can you show how to search for a species?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Search for a species on the internet. Is that what they're asking?
The kind of follow-up, same from Patty, is any other features of the program.
Oh yeah. Hang on.
And again, I'll say that if anybody needs to unmute and ask or clarify their question, please feel free to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to go into eBird. Now this is just the opening page when you go into eBird. And I'm going to hit explore, and this gives me a ton of options. So if I want a species, I would go to the species map. If I know I'm going to Eagle Bluffs and I want to see what birds have been seen there, I would go to explore hotspots. So those are the two, kind of one species, one by location. So I'm going to click on my species map. And let's say I'm going to promote my Barrow's goldeneye. So I want to type in Barrow's goldeneye here. And then over here in location, hang on, I've got to minimize. I can't get to location. It won't let me. Okay, there we go. And then over here, I'm going to type in Missouri. If I spell it correctly. And it will bring up this kind of area of places in the state where they've been seen. I'm going to hit show point sooner. And then I'm going to zoom in. If it has a red dot, it's been seen within the last 30 days. So these are locations that Barrow's goldeneye have been reported and accepted in the state. But the red dot will show you where it's been seen in the last 30 days. So I'm going to click on this. This is Smithville Lake Crows Creek Campground. It tells you everybody that has seen the bird there. I'll pick on Paul McKenzie. If you click on the date, well, wait a minute, first of all, let me show this. This means notes, which you would have to enter in order to submit your list. This means photo. So I'm going to pick on Paul McKenzie. I'm going to click on his list. I'm going to pull it up, and then here's everything that he saw from that location with his photos. So there's his pictures of the Barrow's goldeneye. Does that help? Yes. Okay. Do you want to see what it's like to search for a hotspot? We do that.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Yep, because Patty did ask, any other features of the program, and that sure would be one.
Okay, so I want to go back. I have a lot of things open here. Okay, I'm going to hit explore hotspot, and I'm going to do Smithville Lake. And it'll show up here, and it'll have all the different locations, but I'm just going to do Smithville Lake, Clay County. When I do something, a lot of people will do different areas like Crows Creek Campground Dam. That's more helpful to people when they're trying to find the bird. I always log mine under Smithville Lake, Clay County, just because that gives me one spot to go and look if I need to look something up. So Smithville Lake, Clay County, it'll show you the total number of species that have been seen at this location, how many checklists. You can go in and look at bar charts, high counts, directions. If you hit view details, it might or should, there we go, open up all of the recent birds that have been seen there. So here's everything that has been entered. Doug was just there tonight. So here's what he saw. And you can click on this and it'll give you more information about that species. But it gives you kind of a running tally of what to expect there, what's been seen there recently. It'll show you the most recent photos that are seen, and then all of the recent people that have visited it, the date and their checklist and the number of species that they had on it. So that way you can kind of investigate before you go somewhere and see what you think might be there.
Mary, I've got a question related to that. Is there?
Sure.
You mentioned Smithville Lake. It's got a whole lot of places you could look for something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to find a bird, whether a bird's been seen there, if somebody hasn't showed it on the Smithville Lake, Clay County, you got about 12 different options that you've got to run through. Is there any possibility that in the future, for a place that has many different options that people would choose, that would collect that all under a
Be able to select multiple hotspots that are close together to see everything there?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I will say if you look by species, it will show you. So if I wanted to look for the Barrow's goldeneye, it will bring up all of the locations at Smithville Lake it was seen. So when you go into that map, it's got those, and as you zoom in, you can click on each of those points and see where people have seen it around the lake. Let me you want me to show you? Let's see here. So you go to species map. Missouri. And then I'm going to click my show point sooner. And I'm going to zoom in, and the closer I get into Smithville, it'll show me all those different locations of that one species. So if you're targeting a species, you can do it this way, and it'll show you where different people have recorded it. So at the dam, at the main location for the lake, Crow's Creek Campground, etc. So you can do it if you're targeting a specific species, you can do it like that and go in and see the different spots that people have seen it. If you're just exploring the hotspot, unfortunately, yes, you would have to look at each one of those at Smithville Lake. But I mean, the majority of the checklists there are entered under the main one for the lake. So, unless you knew that there was something rare up there and you were just targeting that, what you enter for the main, when you click on this main, it's a campground, this main one, you'll get most of the species that were seen there. So when you go into your hotspot, if you just type in Smithville Lake, Clay County, it'll give you most of what was seen on the lake in general, because this is the one that most people tend to use. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. Okay. I've got a related question on that. You talked about merging one of your spots, a personal spot, with a hotspot. Yes. If you're part of a shared list, can you still do that? Can I still do that?
Yes. Once you accept that list, it becomes yours.
Okay.
So what was initially sent out by the person that entered the list goes to everyone, but then you can add, you can take birds off of it, add birds, change things around, then it becomes your list.
And you can even change the location on it.
You can always change the location, yes.
Does that
Mary-
take you off? Does that take you away from the shared list, or is it? You got
No.
a shared list that's in one place and somebody else has the shared list. It's located at another place.
No, we had this with the brown booby a lot, where people would share lists, and then when we created the hotspot, we asked people to move it into, and some people would move it into the hotspot before other people. So once you accept that list, now any changes you make to it, that's your list, and those are your changes. It's not reflective throughout the group, but you can move your location or add species or delete species. At the bottom, it'll say species only seen by Dale Anderson, if you add something that other people didn't see, or it'll say, species seen by Brian Vorhaus if you took it off your list and he saw it. So, but you can, once it's your list, once you've accepted it, you can make any changes you want to it. Now, the one thing I will say is if you upload a picture, it will go to everybody else in the group. So
Right.
if you uploaded a picture and Brian uploaded a picture, there would now be 2 photos in everybody's list.
Right.
So Mary, you are seeing Brian's question in the chat. That's very related.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's could you talk about sharing checklists? If you edit a checklist after sharing it, do you have to reshare it in order for your friends to see the change? It sounded like that's yes.
Right. Once that's your checklist, if you enter a group checklist, once you share it and they accept it, aside from photos, you have kind of lost control of the checklist. It's now theirs.
And if the original sharer did change something, they would have to reshare it for their friends to.
They'd have to reshare it, and then their friends would have to re-accept it. And I need to check. I want to make sure that wouldn't give you 2 checklists.
It does not give you 2 checklists.
Okay.
And the thing is, I will see on my list birds that have been seen by somebody else. So when Brian changes his list after he's submitted it and I have clicked it, I have accepted it. The next time I look at it and I see down in the bottom of my list, I'll see that Brian Voorhees has added some birds to it that weren't there before.
Right, but it'll say additional birds seen by Brian. So
Right.
those are not on your personal list. It's
That's
just part of
correct.
the group list. Yes.
That's correct, but he doesn't have to resubmit that list and share it again because it'll be there. If I look at the bottom now, yeah, if I don't know that he's done it, if I don't care, if I don't go back and look at it, I won't know that. But the next time I look at that list, it will be there that he's seen those birds. It'll be on the bottom of my list, and then I can draw them into my list.
Right. You can change your list after you get it. It's just Brian can't change your list for you.
That's correct.
After you get it. Yes.
But I can see where Brian has changed his list on the bottom of mine.
Yes.
Because it'll show the birds that he's added to it.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I have we have a question related to checklists. And that is, someone asks, if you accidentally start a list and you, for whatever reason, you don't end up finishing it, is there a way to delete it without submitting it?
Yes, if it's on your phone, you just swipe it off your phone. You just swipe across your phone and delete, and it'll say delete the checklist. If I've never done that on the computer, but unless you submit it, you have complete control over it, so you can delete it. I think on the computer, I think there's a little trash can, now that I think about that, down at the bottom where you can delete it.
Thank you. A question about from Mr. Ost. What happens to data that is submitted in a county or greater area? Also, how is a species determined to be sensitive, for example, great gray owls?
That's a great question. And I get this a lot. So sensitive species, we're going back and forth with eBird about this. They determine sensitive species, but we would like the ability to set it for saw-whet owls in Missouri or something like that, where as soon as it's reported, it doesn't go anywhere. What I tell people to do, if you have a sensitive species, say you have barn owls, and you want to report them, but you don't want it to hit the eBird alert list. If you wait 2 weeks, it won't show up on the eBird alert. And then once you enter it, you can hide your list until whatever time you're comfortable making that public. If you enter it right away, it will hit even if you hide your list, people won't be able to see your list, but it will hit the rare bird alert. So if I had barn owls right outside my window and I entered it right away, it'll come out in the rare bird alert tonight, even though I went immediately back in and hid that list. But if you wait 2 weeks until after you've seen it and you enter it, and I would put a note in there like waited 2 weeks so it didn't trip the alert list, then you can keep it hidden until you're comfortable making it public. I will say we also will hold sensitive species in queue. So you may enter a barn owl and it's never shown as in the public output, like you go in and search for it and you can't see it. It's because we've held it in the queue to protect that species, especially if it's a nesting barn owl or something like that we think could be exploited. We will do that. But the how to designate sensitive species is an ongoing conversation that we're having with eBird, because they do it kind of at a national level and we feel like we need more control locally. So ongoing conversation there. But thanks for asking it. That's a great question.
And then sort of relatedly, the what happens to the data that's submitted at a county or greater level?
So we like specifics. So sometimes if people enter something, so we accept that for sensitive species. So if you enter an owl at Clay County level, we get it. If you enter a robin at Clay County level, we're not going to accept that for public output. The list needs to be fairly specific, but the eBird reviewer should have a conversation with you about that.
Eric, did you want to comment on that? Is that a
do.
private lands question?
Correct. That was this question in particular. I'm thinking of, I had 2 yellow rails on private wetland in Vernon County this past spring. And since it was private wetland, I just put it at county level. And so I just didn't know what happens to that, because there just aren't too many yellow rail records in general. Is that useful at all? Or because the date, it doesn't show up when you search it.
Right. So I will tell you, from a seasonal editor, I want that information to put in my seasonal report, because we've gone back and looked at seasonal reports from the early 1900s, and it's just super helpful. So I would want to know that even outside of eBird, to put that in my seasonal report. And then Mark likewise would put it in his book, and we would protect it at a county level. Typically, we don't accept records at county levels. It needs to be more specific than that. But again, if it's a sensitive species, we understand. Now, eBird does have some filters built in. So sometimes eBird handles those records and we don't see them. So I'd have to go back and look at your record and see, and I can do that when we get done here and let you know kind of what happened with it. But if you have a route that's longer than 10 miles, eBird is supposed to automatically reject that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it still ends up in our queue. So they don't always work exactly how they're supposed to, but that county level thing is another piece of that, unless it's listed as a sensitive species. But I would always want to know that, I would always want to put that these were seen in Vernon County or whatever, because I think that's important to have that in perpetuity recorded.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Mary, we have, excuse me, the dog is trying to control the computer. So we have a couple questions related to like the app technology. So I'll just read them both at the same time. So are eBird and BirdNet linked the way that Birdseye and eBird are? And then another question is, we heard that the Merlin ID app is now linked with eBird. We have not tried IDing a bird in Merlin yet to put it on our checklist, but how does that work? So kind of two questions, but tech related.
Yes, and I apologize. I don't use Merlin, so I don't know the answer to that. I can sure look that up and get back with you on it, but I don't know. If they say it's linked, I'm guessing that when you go to enter it in Merlin, it will automatically start an eBird checklist for you, but I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, and I'd want to verify that on how that worked. What was the other one? Birds?
Bird net.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know either. And this is from someone who is currently in British Columbia, so possibly it could be a Canadian platform or app or program. I can look into that one.
And Teresa just answered. I see the
Yep.
Merlin thing here
Yep.
down here. Thanks, Teresa.
Yep, she sure did. Yep. Once you ID a bird in Merlin, it asks if you want to add it to an eBird checklist. These are great questions, everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We have one more that I'm seeing in the chat.
Yep. On the checklist entries such as Sparrow SPA, what does eBird do with that data? So most SPAs come through the review queue, just because. And there are times we really like SPAs, and there are times when SPAs are just okay. So in the winter, like in the fall and winter, if you see an ibis, unless you are really close and you can determine that it has a red eye, we recommend that all ibises be recorded as SPAs, because differentiating between white-faced and glossy ibis in the fall, and especially with now the prevalence of hybrids, and LSU is actually doing a study that we should know kind of what percentage of ibises are interbred, and we think it's probably going to be a lot higher than we were to expect. But anyways, they're doing a study on that. But so it would be hard to determine a glossy from a white-faced from an interbred in the fall and winter. So if you see an ibis and it definitely has a red eye and you don't see anything else funky about it, you could record that as a white-faced ibis. Otherwise, everything else we recommend is an ibis SPA. If you just see a bunch of sparrows in the field and you put down, 50 sparrows SPA because they're too far away to ID, that's fine. We accept that. It doesn't really give anybody any information other than there's sparrows in that field if somebody wants to go check it out. But there's times when the SPA is appropriate to use because the identification is too difficult. And then there's times when you're just noting there's a lot of birds here, but they were too far away for me to ID. Does that help, Sarah? Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
What about when you choose to the present, you just X for present? Is that when should it be used? When shouldn't it?
So I am notoriously impatient about counting birds, and I used to use the X all the time. It doesn't really help because now when I go back and look at it, I have no idea if you had 1 or 5,000. So it's fine to use it, but I would put a comment under there like, seems to be thousands. I don't have time to count them, or something. So if somebody has some sort of a reference other than just the bird was present. I have quit using the X because it just isn't that helpful. So if I put in a list, I want to do the work to count them to see where we're at. You may have a new high count, or low count, new high count or less species than we expect there, that kind of thing. So, but if you're in a hurry and there's 500,000 or more snow geese out there and you don't want to take the time to figure it out, just put an X and appears to be 500,000 snow geese. I don't have time to count them. So.
Mary, we got a question in the chat. Are rock pigeons always red dot because most folks don't bother recording?
Correct. And they are typically not at hot spots. Places that have a lot of rock pigeons typically are not places that are hot spots. So that's correct. A lot of people, it's a good question. A lot of people will shy away from counting mute swans, species that they feel like aren't really listed in the state. We have requested that people will record mute swans because we want to track their influx into the state, because that's a species we don't want to have established here. And so that helps MDC. They can go in and see where mute swans have been present in the state. The other thing that we're working on is cackling geese. We really don't have a good understanding of the status and distribution of cackling geese, and they're a species that's very easy to be misidentified. Canada geese interior population are smaller, and so a lot of times people, they're mistaken for cackling geese. So if you see cackling geese, if you could take a photo and upload it with your checklist, that kind of helps us determine. We've never had a checklist that's had documentation of more than 50 cackling geese, and for the most part, it's typically a dozen or less. So if you're somewhere and you think you're seeing 500 cackling geese, it would be important to get documentation on that because they're typically in very low numbers when we do see them.
So we have a question. If I do a count over a day in my yard, do I need to record a start and stop time? I would like to go back and enter reports from the last few weeks that I have recorded on paper.
Yes, if you're doing current data, there is an option when you go in on the computer to choose historical. So it'll have like traveling, stationary. There is an option for historical. And that's for people that are uploading old data into eBird. So they have their complete life list or record of all the birds that they've seen in there. And if you do historical, you don't have to enter that stuff because it recognizes this was something that you did back in the 90s and you didn't write all the stuff down that eBird wants to know. So you can choose historical and you don't have to, but if you're doing a checklist that's in real time or close to real time, then yes, you need a start and stop list. Anything else? So did anybody learn things that they didn't know before? Was this helpful? Dana.
Absolutely.
All right, well, good.
We got some
Mary?
yeses and some nods and things.
Yeah. Mary, I've got another question.
Uh-huh.
I've done some birding in different places, and days were busy, and I don't have an app on my phone, so I have to do it on the computer. And sometimes I don't have time to do it at night, so it gets to be days or weeks later, and I finally get around to it. Is it helpful if I would go back and see a list that I made when I was down in Texas back in March? Is it helpful to go ahead and enter that list, or?
I would say that's personally up to you. If you would like that list. So I moved all of my records into eBird. So I entered lists from Texas from 10 years ago because I wanted to be able to go in and call that data in one spot. So from that standpoint, I would say it's a completely personal decision. Now, if you had something down there that was unexpected, then yes, that would be really helpful. Or if you were birding an underbirded area, it would be helpful to have that data. But if it's just a list of expected species, it just happens to be in a different state, it's your call. But you can always go in and enter those as historical if you didn't keep track of routing and times and all those kind of things. So it's completely up to you. And just know when you enter a list for Texas, the Texas reviewers handle it, not us. So you'll hear from different people. Yeah.
Looks like folks are saying some nice things in the chat, Mary.
Great.
But I would echo thank you. I thought it was extremely informative.
That's good. I see somebody said that sometimes they don't enter gulls because they're not sure of the IDs, and it's fine to put down 1,000 gulspa, and then that just says that the birds were there and they were unable to be identified. That's fine. So no worries about that. And always, last thing I can say, reach out to us. Ryan, Josh, Liza, Pete, Diane. I mean, we're all happy to help. I have people that'll send me photos all the time and say, what do you think this is? Or I tried to do this and I couldn't, or, whatever the questions are. So that's that's why we volunteer, over 365 hours of our time every year, is because we want to be helpful. So we're always glad to help. And if you guys ever have process issues with the documentation process, if something needs to go to the records committee, same thing, reach out to your eBird reviewer. If you're unsure on how to do that, or you're having any problems getting things uploaded, let us know. So, and lastly, go download Mark's book. It's fantastic. So.
Looks like somebody's asking how to reach out. The best way to do that.
You can put my email in there, Dana.
Okay. Actually, I think what we'll do, Mary, is when we kind of gather things for a follow-up email, as long as your fellow reviewers also feel the same way, we can, put the regional folks' emails in there and yours. I mean, I can put
Yes.
yours in the chat right now for sure. But that's something, contact information will be a good thing.
Yes, and I
to
think
put
there's
in
a
there.
way to reach out through eBird too, and I'll go through and figure those steps out if it's still set up the way it used to be, and we can include that in the follow-up email too.
So I'm
Mary.
going to put your email in right now.
Excuse me, Mary, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
When you get an email from a reviewer asking for additional details, why can you not reply directly? Just hit reply? Because I always get those emails returned, and I have to, if they don't have like a CC address or another address on it, I have no way of getting back to that reviewer. Why is that?
So if I send you an eBird email, you can't just reply to me?
Correct. I have never been able to do that. It always ends up, I get that one of those Damon or Demon mailer saying that it didn't go through.
Interesting. I would say, let me ask some questions on that and get back with you, Sherry. I think that may be unique to your email server, because I mean, I send out a lot of messages and I get responses back, and I would think that does it have my email up there at the top where it comes from?
Yeah, but it always has
When you
eBird on it. And I'm on AOL. I'm AOL, so we use the same server. Because I know you're AOL too.
Yeah, if you have one of those, or next time it happens, shoot it over to me. I'll have eBird take a look at it.
Okay.
You should be able, because it should come, even though, so that letter is generated when I'm in the review queue, but it comes from my email. I mean, like, it'll even have my little quotation at the bottom of it when I send it out. And when people respond to it, and the original one is down there, it looks like it just came from my email, and it's got my little signature at the bottom. So next time one of that happens, shoot over one of those error messages to me and let me have eBird kind of troubleshoot that.
Okay. Because it hasn't just been you.
And when I say eBird, it hasn't just been me.
No.
Interesting. I'll ask Ryan and Josh if they've heard about this too.
Yeah, because if I read your email and then at the bottom just click on reply and type in a message and send it, it will not go through.
Interesting. Yeah, let me do some work on that, Sherry, but do shoot me one next time you get one.
Well, hopefully we have to do that for a while. But yes, I will.
Well, I don't know. I mean, review's a good thing, right? You saw something really cool, so.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't take your name in vain anymore. Because I understand why,
I appreciate that.
I understand why you send it, the purpose behind it. But as a new birder, it was really frustrating. It's like, what did I do wrong? And but yeah,
Yeah.
I don't take your name. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do have experienced birders that yell at me because why do I have to enter notes on this? The species is expected. And so I'm hoping going over the filters kind of explains that it's, unfortunately it's just there's a hard number and a hard date. And, as much as we try to make it work perfectly, it won't accommodate everybody. So.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Anybody else got anything before we end here? All right.
Thank you,
Happy birding,
guys.
everybody. Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah,
Thanks to everyone
absolutely.
for attending. Have a good evening.